How's it going? My name is Michael, and I want to welcome you as we continue to attempt to demystify the Bible. This book, or rather collection of books, had a rather profound impact on millions of people's lives. It not only records world history, the writings within it have shaped world history. Beliefs, cultures, nations have all been influenced by what is written on these pages. As an apprentice of Jesus, it's my desire to engage with the scriptures in the healthiest way possible. Hopefully, you can relate. And so once a month, I'm going to share some helpful tips I've picked up over the years in order to help you engage with the Bible in a more meaningful way. This month, I want to chat with you about culture. Here's the thing we need to understand if we want to read the scriptures well. Neither the Bible nor ancient Israelite culture dropped out of heaven. A lot of people wrongly assume that God provided the framework for all of Israelite culture, and then subsequently they critique that culture for not living up to modern standards or even the teachings of Jesus. However, what really happened is that God chose real people living in a real time in a real place with a real culture, and he chose to speak through them despite their flaws. As Bible scholar Michael Heiser points out, they already had a culture with many elements common to the wider world of the ancient Near East and the Mediterranean. What we see in Scripture is that the Bible presupposes culture. Biblical laws presume things like polygamy without ever requiring it. There are laws addressing slavery, but there's no record that God installed the institution as something desirable or sanctified. You see, laws in the Old Testament seem to regulate cultural realities without endorsing them as if they're God's ideal. In other words, just because the Bible talks about something, it doesn't mean the Bible's promoting it. God wasn't saying like, hey, this is perfect. He was saying, this is where humanity is, and this is how I'll work within it, which is crucial to understand. Michael Bird uses the helpful analogy of God putting on a hazmat suit to try to pull humanity towards his desired future. God knew exactly what he was getting when he called Semitic people living 3,000 years ago to write Scripture. As Heiser writes, in some fundamental respects, culture was incidental to God's plans. God gave Israel a body of wisdom literature that laid out broad principles of justice and mercy that transcend all cultures. He was reminding Israelites through the prophets that people from all nations would come to recognize him as the true God and therefore be members of God's family. God's people were never meant to be bound to one cultural expression. From the beginning, God knew his family would eventually include people from every nation, every language, and every culture. The reality is the people of God are independent of culture. Now, another note on ancient culture, one thing to kind of keep in mind as you read the scriptures is that the supernatural world may feel weird to us, but it was very normal to them. They didn't debate whether angels were real. They didn't wonder if demons existed. They didn't assume spiritual experiences were automatically psychological, like misdiagnoses. They lived in a world where the supernatural and the natural regularly intersected. That was their default worldview. And so when the Bible talks about demon possession or rebellious spiritual beings or angels interacting with humans or prohibitions against contacting the dead, the biblical authors aren't trying to convince you that these things aren't possible. They assume that they are. And so here's a kind of key question to kind of challenge your worldview. Why would God forbid practices like necromancy or spirit contact if they weren't possible in the first place? Ancient people had no intellectual struggle believing in an active supernatural world. It's us who do. And that says more about us than it does about them. I think our modern skepticism, at times, it can blind us. I mean, we live in a scientific age, and science is a gift. But modern Christianity can quietly train us to read the Bible like skeptics, even when we say we believe it. We're comfortable with God in theory, but uncomfortable with him intervening. We want rational explanations first. We want natural causes. We want safe categories. But the Bible doesn't give us a distant, hands-off God. It presents a world alive with spiritual reality. Angels, demons, Satan, spiritual beings with real agency. Not metaphors, not symbols, but personal, spiritual entities. To read the Bible faithfully, we don't need to abandon wisdom or discernment, but we do need to abandon the assumption that ancient people were simply ignorant and that we are the enlightened ones. So with all that, what's the takeaway? Well, here it is. If we want to understand Scripture, we have to let the ancient Israelites be who they were. That doesn't mean we imitate their culture, and it doesn't mean we dismiss the Bible because of their culture. It means we stop judging the Bible by modern categories it was never meant or trying to meet. The Bible isn't asking us to adopt ancient customs, it's asking us to trust ancient truth. Our focus shouldn't be on whether the Bible fits neatly into modern sensibilities. Our focus should be on the truth claims of Scripture that transcend culture itself. because I believe the same God who spoke through imperfect ancient people is still speaking through imperfect people today. Well, thanks for watching. I'm cheering you on as you do your best to read the scriptures right and live them well.